First, I want to welcome everybody to Spaces and Places. This is the third iteration, 2019 People, Power, Justice. My name is Amina Hassan, and I'm a proud member of the organizing committee for Spaces and Places, which is an all-volunteer run grassroots network of urban planners, policymakers, and designers. So this year's theme is People, Power, Justice, which I think is really a product of and a reflection of Oakland. And before I pass on the mic, I just want to take a moment to express our gratitude to all of our sponsors and our generous supporters who have volunteered their time to help facilitate today. So a special thanks to our platinum sponsors, Muse Community and Design and Next City. And with that, I'll pass it on to Eric.
Thank you. So my name is Eric Shaw. I happen to have worn a lot of hats, but first of all, I'm a person who was born and raised in the Bay Area in Richmond, California. So to see a lot of people talking about Black issues in a space that for a long time was, so I paid for college based off of all the lawsuits that, for environmental justice reasons as a kid. We used to do class action lawsuits. They put that in a trust. And when I was 18, I woke up and I had $30,000. So I paid for college, but it was because they were putting sulfuric acid in the air, and they were poisoning the water, and they were doing a lot of issues around environmental injustice. We need to debate, we need to tussle, we need to think out of the box, we need to think in the box, we need to break the box. But let's have fun doing it, and let's make sure this network continues. So thank you very much for your leadership, for your intentions, for your awesomeness, and let's go help some communities of color.
Since 2010, roughly 10,000 low-income households were displaced from their homes in the city of San Francisco. So the red is the lowest income, and the white is 0 to 20% income. So you're seeing for each dot, that's an eviction happening, and this data is coming from the Urban Displacement Project. So we had a huge problem on our hands. At the same time, housing prices were doubling in San Francisco, and we were #1 in the nation for growth in income inequality. So we were seeing it across all low-income neighborhoods in the city, primarily communities of color impacted by this. Since we launched in 2014, the program has expanded. The city of Oakland has a program now. Berkeley is launching their program. San Mateo and City of San Jose is also thinking about launching a program. And we just found out that we got additional funding to further small sites in the city of San Francisco. So really excited about the program and the impact that it's having in the Bay Area.
Hi, I'm Megan Venable-Thomas. This is my colleague, Ann Griffith. Our mission is really to create opportunity for working people, and we do that through affordable housing and community development. So, and at Enterprise, the way we do this is through a number of opportunities. We have a national initiatives team, which I'm on, and which Ann is half on, and then we have local investments. We could talk more about that too. We also do local investments, deep investments in different communities or cities across the country. The way that I think about this, and we think about this, has really been, traditionally people think about climate change or resilience, they think about climate change, right? And they think about climate interventions, and we saw that that's very important, but what we also saw through a lot of research is that communities most likely to survive in the face of any type of shock or stressor, acute or chronic, were not just structurally sound, but also socially connected. So how do we really think about investing in social connections? And we found that that really happens through starting with a cultural lens. Right? And not only in how we have access to cultural opportunities, but also how we're thinking with a lens that's grounded in cultural humility. The importance of understanding what the culture is that's happening on the ground and how we leverage that as a real asset and tool. And through this program and this work, what we found is yes, climate is very important and culture is an opportunity to do that, but there's also all these other things that we have to be thinking about too to be effective. And that's, right, social issues, that's economic issues. And what's inherent in resilience, right, people who have been resilient over time is because they have experienced some sort of trauma. And so if we're not coming with a healing-centered lens, then how are we really able to be effective, not only as practitioners to apply, right, this work, but also as practitioners who maybe have experienced this, right, trauma in our own experiences. We found that when we really focus with a cultural lens, right, when we come with this work as practitioners, we see these types of outcomes in this work. We see social connection increase. We see voice and identity present, right, in the residents or the people who we're working with, not only with ourselves. And we begin to see people feeling empowered in the processes of community development. And so Anne's going to talk a little bit about what that looks like on the ground here in the work we're doing.
As Megan mentioned, I am half in the National Initiatives team, but I am also half somewhere else, and that is in the local markets here. And so I'm describing a local context which may be similar to other local contexts, where you have a development, in our case, a wartime development that was built, intended to last about 10 years, that later became housing, public housing, and is located really at the periphery of the city, that is really separate from what is happening in the center where the services are and where prosperity shows up greatest. And that has become black and brown over time. And where the discrepancy and where the challenges have eventually become so significant that folks couldn't ignore it anymore. And we move from very dilapidated public housing into a mixed income community. And when we reached that point, there were a lot of people who stepped up and said, we're gonna do something different. We're gonna invest a lot of money, $1 billion over time, for 4 separate communities. And what we've ended up with is a 3-legged stool that is a large part of the city and their role in this, but also philanthropy and then enterprise. What we're seeing is that if you want to create a mixed income community that isn't like what happens by default, meaning that you replicate the isolation in a smaller community. So your isolation goes from being citywide to being all within one community or within one development, that it takes really intentional support. And so, wrong way? So we get to my cute, no, it's not cute. There we go, it's gonna move, maybe. Anyway, we have moved into a model where we are, there you go, really prioritizing people and moving towards a model of stewardship where people are really at the center of the work. We have also adopted a reparations framework that is looking at moving from truth all the way through reconciliation to transformation.
Okay, resiliency. And I've heard pushback on that, like maybe our communities don't need to be so resilient because that's saying we're just going to keep, the onslaught is going to keep coming and we're just going to have to get stronger and stronger to face it. We want to stop the onslaught. But if we did have to define resiliency at Eastside, it's a lot to do with self-determination. A lot to do with being able to act on behalf of yourself and your community and having that agency and that power. And Prescott brought up the Black Panther Party, and Bobby Seale is still an active part of our advisory board and really sets that tone for serving the people, for capturing the hearts and minds of the people. And we work really hard to show the next generation that level of agency and power so that they understand that they are in that continuum.
Sure, yeah. I think resiliency for me is ensuring that families can stay and build a legacy in the communities they've been living in their whole life. And that's, I think, the goal of the Small Sites program, is to keep low-income San Franciscans in the city. At the same time, I also think of it as, how do we keep these buildings healthy and long-lasting? So what investment do we need to make sure the building is safe from a structural standpoint, to doing lead remediation and other kind of health upgrades to the actual physical space? So keeping the housing there, but keeping it also healthy for the folks who are living in it.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying about empowerment and agency, and being able to feel that you have the assets and the resources readily available to be able to bounce back. I mean, when we're thinking about resilience, we're not just talking about a tornado or an earthquake. We're also talking about, right, these chronic issues that we're seeing in the communities that we work in around discrimination, right, police brutality, eviction, deportation, right? Like, these are some of the issues that have bubbled up to the surface that time and time again in the communities that we've worked. And so I think when we're talking about resilience, it's talking about how are we creating the opportunities for people to be able to connect with each other, but also leverage the existing resources to respond to that as assets, right? Because I think traditionally we don't think about culture and our cultures as assets, but the reality is the fact that I'm here is resilient.
One last thing real quick, which I think is exciting and is just kind of bubbling up in East Oakland, is the idea of a community endowment and the idea of sharing power, but sharing resources. And as foundations and philanthropy and investors, kind of make good on equity assertions, monies can be put into this shared pool, and then it's a community board that decides where those resources go, and really honestly sharing the wealth that comes in.
Thank you so much for our first panelists. Let's give them a round of applause. Amazing work, amazing stories. Thank you so much.